It's a funny thing, reality. Sometimes you can go your entire life choosing to ignore it, until one day you find it staring you directly in the face, asking you for another apple juice. I had never seen myself as capable of taking care of another human being. I could hardly take care of myself. But when I think about it, I realized that Clark needed me. And in some ways, I think I needed him. Every year, there are over 3 million cases of child abuse that go reported. Unfortunately, there are still thousands of cases that go without prevention. In the following selection, Molly, a teenager who takes up a job as a camp counselor, meets a kid who reminds her a lot of herself. And she decides that if she can't change her past, she's going to try to help his future. Presenting Ants by Clint Snider. I took up a job as a camp counselor. The pay wasn't ideal, but it was I. I remember one day I was sitting at the table with all the kids and we were eating lunch, and Clark tugged on my shirt sleeve just to tell me that the ravioli tasted like dead cat. If there was one thing that I could say about kids, it would be that they're always honest. Well, most of the time. Maybe I'm just not that honest. That wasn't what told me that Clark and I had been through some of the same things, though. He was perfect. At least he wanted to be. And I did too. You see, most therapists will tell you that in cases of abuse, children are more likely to fail classes and skip school. But what they don't usually tell you is that sometimes we're the perfect ones. I remember one day all of the counselors and several of the kids and I went on a nature hike. It wasn't anything exciting, mostly just dead leaves and fallen logs. But to a 10-year-old, it might as well have been a trip to the moon. Clark kept pointing out all of the sticks and the footprints and everything that was out there. But he pointed out one thing that stood out a little bit more than the rest. It was an anthill. I remember watching as several of the kids started stepping all over these ants, who were working themselves to death for this one piece of perfection in their lives. And I was just, it made me so angry. I remember I unscrewed the cap to my water bottle and I poured the water down the hill. And when Clark saw how angry I was, he came up and he hugged me. On the way back to camp, Clark tripped and banged his knee. He kept saying that he was fine and he kept walking, but I could tell from the way that he was limping that something was wrong. So I sat him down on a rock and I lifted up his pant leg. I immediately saw the fresh scrape. But under that, I saw that his legs were covered with thick bruises. And I think the only thing that kept me from falling over in shock in that moment was the fact that I wasn't all that shocked. I knew that this was happening, but I just kept shoving it to the back of my mind because I just knew that it was another imperfection on him. And from the way that he talked about all of his medals and his good grades, I knew that he was just like me. And that we needed to be perfect because we both thought that if we could be perfect and make them happy, that maybe they wouldn't hit us anymore. He immediately covered it up, saying that He liked to roller skate, he just wasn't good at it. He was a good liar. So was I. We had to be in order to tell ourselves that we were normal, and that we were perfectly well adjusted, and that nothing was wrong with our lives. But on the inside, we felt like we were being eaten away like a mound of dirt by ants. That night, I had a dream. I had a nightmare. I was standing on a hill watching the sunset with Clark. And as we were standing there, this dark, hooded figure came up behind us, and he grabbed Clark away from me. I turned around and I watched as the hooded figure started hitting Clark across the face, and there was nothing that I could do. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move, I couldn't make a noise, and I was frozen in place, and I felt like my insides were rotting because I couldn't do anything, and I couldn't help him. I couldn't help him. The next day, I called child welfare, and I told them everything that I knew. And I figured I should probably tell Clark too. So I called him to my cabin, and I sat him down. I knew he would be so angry with me for doing this. I knew because I would have been angry too. But when I told him, he wasn't angry. He wasn't mad. He just looked at me through tears and smiled. But this wasn't the same fake smile that we had been using our entire lives, just to tell the world that we were okay when we weren't. This was a real smile. After a while, I gave him a hug and I asked him if he wanted another brownie. And of course, him being a 10-year-old boy, he said yes. So I got up and I went to the cupboard and I got out 2 brownies, and as we were eating, Clark looked over at the ground and he saw a single ant, strong and independent. And I watched as Clark walked over to the ant and gave him a tiny little crumb and said, "You're gonna be all right, little buddy." And for a moment, I thought, yeah, we're gonna be all right.